Good day to those listening and those watching. I am not a Kovinich, and with me is Garrett Pedlar. Together, we are your Small Town Realtor Podcast. Make sure to like, follow, share this episode, and of course, drop us a comment on your takeaways from this episode. We appreciate you being here and hope you enjoy this episode. Today, we are talking about how this job is not always selling sunset. We are going into the dirty side of the job, and I'm not talking about dirty deals. I'm talking about actually getting your hands dirty while doing this job. There are so many different aspects of the job that people don't talk to you about when you're getting licensed and when you're coming on. And today we're going to go into all of the different things that we've experienced and how this job is not about wearing your click-clack heels, walking around in beautiful clothes, and it's about digging holes, walking through spider webs, and what it's truly like to be a realtor, not in the selling sunset version.
First up, selling sunset things they don't talk about, tenants who don't want to move. It's a tough topic and a tough scenario to have to work around. We all can feel compassion for the tenants that are getting kicked out. Sometimes it's because they didn't hold up the end of their stick, and sometimes it's the landlord just wanting to move on with the property. But it's very difficult. And this is one thing they do not talk about on selling sunset, when a tenant is not being cooperative. I mean, it's a tough situation for all of us. So let's just work together. Let's find a place that everyone's happy and go maybe try and help them find something else. But selling occupied properties is probably one of the biggest challenge points when it comes to selling a home. Access issues. You got to give them 24 hours. You now got to tell two people to try and get a showing, and one doesn't want the showing and the one wants the showing, but he's the landlord and one's the tenant. Can make things a little challenging.
For sure. And the other thing that we're dealing with on the topic when you go with tenants is hoarders. And it's not always tenants, but it can be a homeowner. I mean, I've walked through a property where the boxes were so high, there was literally a path to walk through the property so that you could see it. We got upstairs, you get into the bathroom, and the boxes in the shower were from wall to floor, and you're wondering, how are they taking a shower in here? And let me tell you, with this property that I am talking about, this smell was pretty pungent. And so you're dealing with hoarders, but when you're dealing with a client that's a hoarder and it's a homeowner, it's having that conversation with them. How do you have the conversation and say to them, listen, unfortunately, we've got to get some of this stuff out there, and whether out of this property, and whether you're there helping them move some of it out or you're hiring a company, there's a lot of situations in these hoarder homes where if you don't get some of that stuff out, you're really not going to be able to showcase that property. And having those conversations with people can be so complicated and difficult because they love their home and sometimes they don't recognize that they're actually hoarding in that home. So whether it be getting a storage bin or trying to help them get some of that stuff out of there, it can be a really tough conversation to have, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable, but you'll be more comfortable when you can sell that property for a higher price than continuously pretending the literally elephant in the room isn't there, and that's why the home isn't selling.
Oh, that is a tough one to deal with for sure, because that person's probably been living like that for way too long, and they actually like what they want to put it in their house if they didn't want it. So now you're telling them to get rid of a bunch of stuff. Number 3 on things they don't talk about on selling sunsets, septic inspections. Who doesn't love the smell of everyone else's shit and piss? It's awesome. That's some smell of money. They say for farmers, when they spread the manure on their fields, that's the smell of money. Well, for real estate agents, it's kind of a similar thing. When you get that septic inspection, that's usually the smell of money. It can be gross, but if you've been in it long enough, you start just to get used to it. I think there's Nada brought up a story that she's gotten so used to it. She can eat her lunch around it. It doesn't bug her one bit. And you know what? It's something that needs to be done. So steer clear and be knowledgeable on how the septic system works. because there's nothing worse than you being grossed out, the real estate agent, when that lid gets opened up and the smells happen. You got to take their mind off of it and talk about the necessity of the system and how it all operates, because that's a huge part about small town rural real estate that we need to deal with. So make sure you're knowledgeable on it and don't let the smells get to you.
Yeah, I can eat a sandwich while a septic inspection is happening. It's actually that bad. And I also can't count the amount of septic lids that I've dug out myself and in heels, like selling Sunset. So I have dug out a number of septic lids and eating a sandwich while they're pumping it out. You do get used to the smell. It's pretty bad, but you do actually get used to it. Another thing, I mean, we're on inspections. Let's talk about crawl spaces. I mean, in my area, we do have a lot of crawl spaces in some of our more cottage type waterfront properties. And, the moisture in there and the critters sometimes that get in there, I have actually squeezed myself into enough crawl spaces filled with cobwebs. I used to have a fear of spiders, actually. And if you do enough crawl space walkthroughs, that fear of spiders doesn't happen. You're more afraid of the squirrel coming face to face with you down in that crawl space, especially in these cottages that people aren't living in year round. And, there's the smell of the moisture if they don't have a vapor barrier down. There's different things that you can experience. I have actually met a squirrel face to face down in the bottom of a crawl space. And it's quite an experience. But I mean, crawl spaces is another thing that, we're crawling through these small holes that nobody goes down, because what do you need to go down there for? And some of them might be 4 feet. Those ones aren't the bad ones. But when you're getting into the ones that are, even less, and you're squeezed in there with a flashlight trying to see what you can see, to help with whatever the buyer, so that they understand what the crawl space is like before you get an inspection done. I always say I'm not an inspector, but I definitely like to take a look in those spaces. And, or when you're doing the inspection and the inspector sees an issue and you want to know what's going on down there. So you're down there looking around with them. Definitely some smells, definitely remnants of some animals sometimes in those cottages. And it can be a real experience. And I'm telling you, they don't show that on Selling Sunset. That is nowhere.
I just had a showing there yesterday or 2 days ago. And, when it comes to crawl spaces, I'm in my work clothes, so I'm not trying to jump into those. And I'm sure you're the same, Nada. It takes a little I got to get in there. Okay, let's do this. And so the buyer went down, came out, was like, hey, this doesn't look right. And these weren't good things, what he was saying. I was like, okay, here we go. We're getting in there. So I followed him back in and we went and checked it out. So it is just part of the job that they definitely don't show in Selling Sunset. And a little tough to not show this in Selling Sunset, because today's TVs don't give out perspiration for what they're smelling. But maybe in a few years, we will get that out of our TVs with the way technology's going. But that's where I'm going to take you next, is smells that don't show up in photos. We have all walked into someone else's house, whether they're a smoker, pets that maybe just, they get nose blind to these things. They got 2-3 dogs and they got wet a couple days ago. And, now the house has another little pungent smell. Mold obviously can really give off a terrible smell, and mildew. And, I'm in cottage country, and Nada definitely has a big cottage country around her too. And, these houses get locked up for 6-8 months over the winter. They get opened up. The owners, they think that's just cottage smell. Well, I'll tell you what, there's some other stuff going on in your place, and you should maybe keep the heat on and get some newer windows. Those wood frame single pane things aren't doing you any justice. But yeah, walking in, and at least when it's your own listing, to prepare for it. So you go 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early, open the windows up. Hopefully this doesn't just punch this person in the face when they walk in to see the house. But when it's not your listing, that's a little more difficult to do. You don't feel so comfortable screwing around with other people's windows and doors and whatever. And when you both get punched in the face, with that smell of smoke or mildew, that's kiboshes things very, very quickly.
And speaking of smells, I have walked into my own properties that we've had tenants in, and we've had the sheriff come in and evict it. And we're going to go into a little bit on the pest side of things. And we walked into a property filled with feces, like dog feces, animal feces, cat feces. And I was in there with the sheriff at the time. We're in an upstairs unit, and all of a sudden a little rat comes crossing by us as well. So you can really run into some pest issues when you're out there looking at these properties. And you've never seen a rat run through on Selling Sunset. I'm telling you, I've watched every episode and they've never shown a rat. And I don't know why, because there's got to be rats out there too. Like, it can't just be in our small towns. They've got rats in big cities. How come they never show that? I mean, there's another example I have with pests, and we went up into we were in a farm, and I climbed the ladder into the hayloft, wanted to take a look at it, and I was in heels again, just so I tie myself into that Selling Sunset. But again, I ran into a raccoon right in my face, me and the raccoon eye to eye, and we both paused. It was almost like, what are you doing up here? What are you doing up here? And, you're running into these things. And I'm telling you, Selling Sunset only shows how beautiful these views and these properties are. But there is no way these women have never ran into these issues, because there are pests in the big cities just as much in our small towns. And I think they need to start showcasing that in an episode. Seeing one of those girls climbing a ladder in their stilettos and running into a raccoon would probably get them a ton of ratings.
I love that. And I can promise you, I mean, my scenarios, I haven't been in any heels. So Nada, kudos to you. You're doing it with an extra level of difficulty than I am. So kudos to you and the ladies doing that. Houses not being maintained in years. It is easy, definitely in cottage country. Once again, the cuteness of it is almost to not maintain it. And that's what makes it cute, because nature is consuming this place. But when you're trying to sell it and get the curb appeal, boy, is that a difficult one to do without a lot of heavy duty work. And bring the weed whacker and excuse me, is how many times, you put your arrow signs on corners or put your for sale sign up, and you come back with your weed whacker, and you got to whack the weeds down so that hopefully they can actually just see my for sale sign, let alone some photos of this place that make it look nice. So, the maintenance, and that's why I went and bought a backpack blower. And that's pretty much, I bring that to any cottage I'm going to go list. Backpack blower, my whipper snipper, so that I can go chop down the weeds by the walkways and everything and give it a blow. Unfortunately, that's just one of the fun jobs that this job brings, and that they do not show you in Selling Sunset.
Yeah, the realtor cleanup part of things is definitely one of the aspects of our job that is not discussed. I mean, I've washed more floors, moved more furniture, carried out more garbage. And, sometimes with these rural properties, you're not going to leave the garbage bags at the end of the road, because, again, you're going to be dealing with pests going through the garbage by the time garbage day comes. So I've loaded it in the back of my SUV, and the drive home went with the windows down and sunroof down, because you got to get these properties cleaned up and ready. And the sacrifice you're going to make is, and in those circumstances, I'm not in heels, I'm in yoga pants and running shoes. And when I'm going into a cleanup day on a listing, because it's two different nadas, hair up, yoga pants, running shoes. The next day I'm back there with my heels and a dress for the listing video. But they don't talk about the cleanup that you have to do, and the moving furniture. And some of this furniture hasn't been moved in years. And so you're mopping these floors and trying to get it all ready. And the sellers are stressed too. So you want to try and help and make this as smooth as possible. And so you are doing a lot of the cleanup, and no one talks to you about all the garbage and the cleanup that you will be doing to try and make sure that you get these homes from listed to sold.
Absolutely. This is another great one they're not showing you on Selling Sunset, is a home inspection gone sideways. We've all dealt with it, and it is something that you got to detour. And I also think there's a big part on a home inspector that can actually explain a situation better, and not to not make a big deal of it, because all these things may be a big deal, but to, also go with, this is about how much it would cost to remediate this, or, this is what I think you should do to stop this, and that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, sometimes a buyer, depending on what that home inspector says, they'll just walk away and don't want to hear that other side of it. I mean, the house was built with money, so money can address a lot of these situations. So let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. I actually had a funny one. It was a century home. And so, there's been insulation in the attic for 100 and some odd years. And so the home inspector said that a leak was fixed by someone putting cardboard over the insulation between the roof joists. And so I said, that makes no sense. Who's addressing water with cardboard? Let's go take a leak. And what it was the old insulation had the paper backing. And so all the insulation was on that. It was the insulation from 60 years ago or something like that. And I was like, gosh, like how? Now I'm not the home inspector, but I'm trying to explain this to the buyer's agent. And I'm just like, this isn't my place to do this, but here we are. We're just explaining how houses get built, and we got to be home builders on top of home sellers.
Yeah, exactly. And it's surprising on some of the things that we'll go through with stuff like that. I wanted to maybe, just like we were talking right there, Garrett, about different scenarios that we've run in. I've got one, and then I'll let you discuss it. It's actually, so we had Nick Hill on our last episode, and he had friends of his that were buying a property down here in Cornwall. And we've looked through a bunch of properties, and we were at our final one, and it was a tenanted unit. And we got upstairs, and there was a stack of like 20 old pizza boxes, and you could see the maggots like just there on the kitchen counter. You could see the maggots on the garbage. And then it was the middle of winter, and we went to go through, and we wanted to go to the last, and the smell was obviously super strong, and it almost smelled like decay. And so we went to go into try and get into this final bedroom, and the tenant would not allow us in there. And to this day, I do not know what was behind that door. But keep in mind, it was the middle of winter. It smelled like decay, and the air conditioning was running full pin. It was minus 10, 15 degrees outside, and they had air conditioning running full pin in this bedroom. So I don't know what was back there, but I knew there were maggots all over the kitchen, and that there was some kind of something in that back room. There was 3 of us that were in there at the time, and we all got out of there. And you almost felt as though you were covered in maggots, and you just couldn't get that sensation out of your mind. And to this day, that is one of the worst units I have walked through.
Oh, fun stuff right there, Nada. I got probably one of the funniest situations was, thankfully didn't involve maggots, but it involved oil. And so we had an oil furnace in this house we were selling. And so one of the conditions, because, it can be a mess trying to get rid of oil in the oil tank. So it was a cottage for these folks. And so in the condition was the oil tank will be removed prior to closing. And so me and Mark are like, we'll get rid of the oil tank. We'll figure it out. And the sellers are like, there's hardly any oil in there. There's like, we haven't filled it up in a couple of years. And keep in mind, they don't come up in the winter when the oil's being used. So me and Mark, we don't have oil tanks ourselves. The meter to read how much oil's in is broken. So that you can't go off of that. We're knocking on the thing. I think it's pretty low, Mark. And so thankfully, there was a sale on garbage cans at our local hardware store. So because we go with 2, okay? We go with 2 thinking, we'll empty it out. And we had a guy who had an oil furnace. So it was okay, fill these up, bring it to Buddy with the oil furnace, put it in his. We filled up 12 garbage cans of oil. And I'm talking, and so we had to drive down this is like the most unenvironmental thing ever. We had to, like, if we got in a crash, there was a lot of oil going all over the place. So we had to drive these 20-25 minutes down the road, throw them into Buddy's thing, and before. So what turned into, thought it might take an hour and a half, ended up being a 6-7 hour project. By the time, there's no accelerator to turn the oil on and off. So you're just using your finger on the little tab that's emptying it. It was one of the funniest things. And me and Mark, we still, if there's something that's got to be done, we still get a chuckle out of it and bring that up. And then funny enough, is a house I'm selling right now, she needs to get the old, it must have been an old oil tank, but it's not the same similar shape that you see of the normal ones, the big long cylinders. This one's more like square and looks like really old. And she's like, it's empty. Like, there's no oil in it. It's like, I have a gas furnace, and that gas furnace is like 17, 18 years old or 15 years old. So like, she's like, there can't be any oil in it. And I'm like, I'll help you get rid of that. We'll deal with that. So time should tell. I don't know. Maybe I haven't learned my lesson to say I'll help her with that, but that's going to be an interesting one. I'm excited for it.
Garrett, you might have bit off more than you can chew.
Yeah.
You might be driving down the road with a few garbage cans in the next few little weeks there.
The joys of real estate.
The joys of real estate. And I mean, this job is great. We love what we do, and we're so grateful for what we can do. And of course, they don't always showcase these items. And I would love if they did do a show to show you the septic inspections. I think eating a sandwich by the septic inspection, that would get a few views. Hoarder homes, all of the different aspects of this job. It really is a great job at the end of the day. And it's not selling sunset. There are the selling sunset moments when we're doing our listing videos. Those look great. But there is this side of this job that people don't always express. If you've liked this episode, make sure you shoot us a comment, like us, follow us. We have so many more episodes to come, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.